Today's story is about how Brahma and Vishnu set up the geography of Indonesia when they carried a mountain, which also happened to be the center of the universe, out to a floating island. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narada Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you exciting and fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. A quick note. Thank you for all the questions and comments and suggestions that you've been putting in the Spotify Q&A. In future episodes, I'll try to address them. Please do keep them coming. I love hearing your feedback. In this episode, we are doing a story about Brahma because a couple of you asked for it. This one is not actually from India. Yes, you heard that right. This story is from Indonesia, and it explains some of the geography of that country. Now, I know that this show isn't Stories from Indonesia, but seeing as how Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and myself are the central figures in this story, I think it totally makes sense to cover it on this show. A quick introduction to the Holy Trinity, in case you somehow missed hearing about them before. They are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creator of the universe. He's also my dad. Yep, I am quite a famous person in Indian mythology. Just ask anyone you meet on any street in India. Chances are they will tell you exactly who I am. Anyway, I digress. If Brahma created the universe, you'd need someone who could destroy it. And that is Shiva. Shiva lives in Mount Kailash, a mountain in the Trans-Himalayan Kailash range. This is a fact that will be relevant in today's story. The way Shiva destroys the universe is by dancing. That's right. So if you thought Prabhudeva or Hrithik Roshan's dance was earth-shattering, it's nothing at all compared to Shiva's dance. And finally, if one creates, another destroys, you need a third entity to preserve. And that entity is Vishnu. I am probably the best person to ask about Vishnu, seeing as how I'm his number one fan. I'm the president for life of his fan club. Look me up in any literature. You'll see how I'm always fanboying over Vishnu. I'm always chanting his name too. Vishnu this, Vishnu that. Anyway, the three of them meet occasionally to discuss how the universe is to be run. Our story starts at just such a meeting. I had the privilege of watching them in action. Brahma explained to Shiva and Vishnu that it was bring your child to work day, and that's why he had brought me there. Shiva looked a little skeptical, but Brahma explained that it was a means of building self esteem. For the child, not for the parent. The Bring Your Child to Work Day was also a way of exposing children to professions they might be interested in the future. Shiva was still skeptical. He asked Brahma who created this, but then realized and answered his own question. If this monstrosity of a day was created, it must have been Brahma. I wasn't paying much attention to this back and forth between Shiva and Brahma. I was staring at Vishnu in complete awe. It was one of my earliest meetings with Vishnu. So naturally, I was staring. I mean, if you were in my position, I'd bet you'd do the same. Vishnu has that effect on people. The meeting began, and Brahma announced the first order of business. There are some civilizations on a planet in the Andromeda galaxy that are getting very belligerent. They are going to war, and they are going to destroy each other. Shiva yawned. I already took care of it. I made a nearby star go supernova. Those civilizations were wiped out a few minutes ago. Brahma stared in shock. What? What about those beautiful fjords and those mountains I created on their planet? You destroyed it all? Relax, Brahma, Vishnu said. I have nightly, weekly, and monthly backups. You can download those and use them as a template if you're creating another planet somewhere else. That's a relief, Brahma sighed. I confess I was badly scared there for a moment. He caught his breath and continued. All right. Next item. This one's on the Earth. There's a floating island in the Indian Ocean. I call it Java. Like the programming language? Shiva asked. Or like coffee? Vishnu questioned. Neither, Brahma said. I just named it Java. The programming language name came from coffee, and the coffee was named after this island. So I really must take credit for naming all three. Anyway, back to the problem with the island. It's floating. So what? Vishnu asked. All continents are drifting. Why is this island a big deal? Brahma went on to explain that this island was moving a little too fast. It was a hazard in what was a very busy shipping lane. And it was a pretty big island. What if it crashed into the shore? It would destroy some perfectly crafted shoreline. It had already skimmed the top off of the Ramasetu bridge connecting India and Sri Lanka. And it still showed no signs of slowing down. Finally, Shiva and Vishnu agreed that some action needed to be taken. But what? While they were deeply thinking, I spoke up. I know, I said. My dad can create a giant anchor, and then we can just attach it to the island and drop the anchor in the ocean. That's it. Vishnu shook his head. Anchor? No. Just dropping an enormous anchor like that is going to cause a massive tsunami. and they have enough tsunamis in the region already. But I agree, we should pin down the island at one place so it stops moving. They thought a little bit more, and finally, Shiva suggested a solution that convinced everyone. They'd use something very heavy, like a paperweight. They'd put it on the island so that it would effectively stop moving. And the moment he suggested it, all three minds thought of exactly what to use to weigh down this island. Meru, they all said in unison. Meru, or Sumeru, or Mahameru is a mountain. It's a sentient mountain which we have encountered before. Meru was character of the week in episode 12. It's a gigantic mountain. The Himalayas were merely its foothills back then. I had read that Meru is the center of the universe. It was on this last point that I raised a weak objection. Are we okay to just shift the center of the universe? Won't that create some complications? All three of them burst out laughing. Apparently, I hadn't learned enough back then. Vishnu patiently corrected me. The universe had no true center, he said. Everything was at once at the center of the universe, because the universe has no edge. This was something I couldn't quite wrap my head around back at that time, so I just stayed silent, promising myself that I was going to make a mad rush to the library after this to read up on the universe's structure. Let's do it right now, Vishnu suggested. I have to be home in time for lunch with Lakshmi. But is Meru okay with it? Meru is sentient. We should at least ask him, I said. To which Vishnu replied that he already did. I was going to ask when Vishnu checked with Meru. The idea had literally come up just now. And I stopped myself in time, because I realized Vishnu was all over the place. While he was here in this meeting, he was also down on earth as Parshuram, as Ram, as Krishna. While he was sitting in the room with us, he had already communicated with Meru. Now, you might have expected me to ask what Vishnu's hurry was to get back home for lunch with Lakshmi. Couldn't he also eat with Lakshmi while sitting here with us? But I didn't ask that, because I thought I had asked enough questions already. If I became a nuisance, I would not get to accompany Brahma on the next Bring Your Child to Work day. So I kept silent and I observed. The Meru relocation program began by Brahma and Vishnu transforming into giant animals. Shiva said that he would sit this one out. He had just destroyed a planet, maybe a bit hastily, so he didn't want the risk of breaking something else on Java. Instead, he'd find something to decorate this island with. While Shiva was going to do some home center shopping, he suggested that Vishnu and Brahma could take Meru and pin down Java with it. It seemed to Shiva to be a fair division of labor, especially because he had single-handedly solved the other problem, the one with the belligerent civilization in the Andromeda galaxy. Vishnu and Brahma said nothing. But then my dad transformed into a giant snake. He was huge. He slithered off and coiled around Mount Meru. We saw it on the live feed. All journalists were having a field day with this news. Literally, they were out in the field watching a giant snake coiled around the massive mountain. Rumors were floating around of a second Sagar Manthan, like in episode 51. And those rumors took on momentum when Vishnu appeared as a huge turtle. And when the snake placed Mount Meru on the turtle's back, everyone was convinced that another Sagar Manthan was definitely coming up. People rushed home. They got all kinds of baskets and bags to collect the goodies that might emerge from the ocean. They also brought along a gas mask, just in case the poison would emerge again, like it did with the Sagar Manthan. Shiva didn't seem to be around to drink it this time and to save them. But all those people were disappointed because Vishnu the turtle and Brahma the snake swiftly carried Meru and went out of sight in no time. People waited a few days by the beach. Then they finally realized that there was no Sagar Manthan happening and that Meru was not coming back. They would have to get used to not having such a massive mountain to look up to. People would have to settle for just the Himalayas instead. Meanwhile, Vishnu was driving Mount Meru at breakneck speed towards Java. Brahma was navigating while he also tracked the location of Java. It was a bit hard to do when he had no hands and while his body was completely coiled around the mountain. But Brahma had to stay coiled around the mountain just to keep it stable. If it fell off of Vishnu's back, it would certainly cause a massive tsunami. Upon nearing the island, Vishnu slowed down. Thankfully, the island was largely uninhabited, so it was easy to decide where to place the mountain. Except, it wasn't. When they had reached and then slowed down, Vishnu asked Brahma to gently place the island down. Meru seemed a lot heavier now, and Brahma wondered why. Maybe Brahma was exhausted. Placing the mountain back on land was a lot more difficult than it had been in putting the island on Vishnu's back. Vishnu had to collaborate with a shove of his own. "Jor laga ke," they both screamed, and then in one final shove, moved the island to the western tip of Java. The island immediately stopped moving. But there was a problem. A big problem. Because the island soon started to tip over. Before the island could sink, however, the quick-thinking Vishnu and Brahma gave the mountain a hard shove and then continued pushing it till it was on the eastern side. And there it stands today. The locals call it Semeru, and if you visit Indonesia, you can even hike there. But is it really the tallest peak in the world that makes the Himalayas look like anthills? No, not really. But that's because of what happened when Vishnu and Brahma moved Meru from one side to another. In their haste to quickly stabilize the island, they also caused parts of it to break and fall down here and there. Everywhere that a piece of Meru fell, a new mountain was created. There were so many mountains that if you were to add up their individual heights, you'll see what I meant about Meru towering above the Himalayas. These mountains include the Lavu, the Kelad, the Vilis, Kavi, Arjuno, Velirang, and Penangungan. The last thing that was left, of course, was how Shiva had planned to decorate the island. Brahma and Vishnu stood on the beach, back in human shape and size. They were talking about celebrating their hard work with a well-earned lassi. Shiva appeared before them and congratulated them on a job well done. Shiva said that he too had done his job very well. He had decided the perfect use for this mountain. And given the almost infinite possibilities he had to eliminate, his work was definitely a lot more challenging than Vishnu's and Brahma's had been. All they had done was to move a mountain. No big deal. They all had moved heavy stuff before. But Shiva was proud to announce that the Sumeru mountain was now going to be his summer home. Over Vishnu's and Brahma's objections, Shiva told them to think about it for a minute. Did they really expect that he would stay in the frigid temperatures in Mount Kailash forever? It was cold there. It was true that he didn't need to buy a refrigerator at his home, and he always had an endless supply of ice cream. But the reality was that he needed someplace warm to camp out occasionally. Vishnu wasn't buying it, but he was also running out of time. He looked down at his watch and said that he could not see eye to eye with Shiva on this. And that wasn't just a reference to the fact that Vishnu had 2 eyes and Shiva had 3. He just refused to accept that Shiva could just claim this place as his second home. But he had to run. His lunch with Lakshmi, in case everyone forgot. But Vishnu was definitely not giving in. Brahma would stay here and continue the argument on Vishnu's behalf. Vishnu said that and quickly left. Brahma and Shiva stared at each other. Brahma was going to open his mouth to speak, and then he hesitated. He tried again and stopped again. You see, Brahma had made Shiva cross a couple of times. He recalled the Character of the Week segment from episode 23, when Brahma had 5 heads and Shiva had removed one of them as a punishment. Or episode 46, when Shiva caught Brahma in a lie and banned all Brahma worship. The Creator hesitated a 3rd time. Shiva asked, "Something you want to say, Brahma?" Brahma sighed and decided to hold his tongue. "No, nothing at all. Carry on, Shiva. I think I need to go and rest for a bit." Brahma thought, if Shiva wanted a summer home on a mountain, so be it. In the future, the people of Indonesia were going to think that a deity lived on the mountain. So, Why not prove them right, preemptively? Besides, many would welcome the change. Visiting Shiva was going to be much more pleasant in his warmer abode than in the very cold Mount Kailash. That's it for this time. For the next episode, a couple of you listeners asked for a story from the Singhasan Battisi. If you haven't heard earlier Singhasan Battisi stories, that is fine. You can listen to next week's episode even without any context, because the 32 stories in the Singhasan Battisi all stand alone. It's a story within a story. We'll see whether or not Raja Bhoj is yet worthy of sitting on Vikramaditya's throne. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast, or just reply to the Spotify Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A huge thank you to each and every one of you for all your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.